Hello, and welcome to Thrive Wellness. My name is Paul McQueen. I'm a clinical psychologist. In these crazy times we're living in right now, I've been getting concerned about how people will be able to access the services that psychologists like myself can provide. Right at a time when I think people could really benefit from seeing a psychologist, both cost and physical access are simultaneously making this difficult. For that reason, I decided to start producing and releasing a series of videos covering what I think are the most useful tools that I can offer to people in these challenging times. In doing this, I'm mindful that watching a stranger on a video will never be the same as being able to talk to someone face to face about your own specific circumstances. This video platform completely eliminates your side of the conversation. I've thought for a long time before recording this about how I can best help you when I don't even get to meet you or hear your story directly. So this is my idea, that I'll release a series of videos that cover some of the most useful concepts that I think can be delivered in this format. Then, so you can get the benefits of speaking to someone directly, I'd also suggest that you might start thinking about making a budget to actually see a psychologist in person. And I'll talk more later in the video about some of the options for access to a psychologist and how that can be made affordable for you. So let's get started. In today's video, I want to focus on fear and anxiety and how these can affect our brains. I think that's the best place for us to start because it'll be relevant to most people right now. There are just so many things right now that people can be anxious about. Job security, your health, your financial situation, the well-being of people that you care about. There's a lot on people's minds right now. And so I'm hoping that this video can be of some help to you. This might get a bit technical, but please bear with me because I think if you can understand the ways that anxiety can affect your thinking, it will help you to not just cope, but to thrive with some of the challenges ahead. In particular, I'm wanting to help you be in a position to avoid making the kinds of decisions that could make things worse for you or for your family. We all like to think that we are sensible, logical, level-headed. We watch how other people are responding to the unfolding crisis and we think, why? Why do you want to buy so much toilet paper? But I hate to break it to you. Nobody is truly rational. We all have a logical side. We have a capacity to be rational. But every single one of us is prone to irrational behavior, at least at times. So to get us started, I want you to do a little exercise with me right now. I'm going to ask you to picture two scenarios in your mind. Try to imagine these like they're actually happening to you as I describe them. So if I could get you to close your eyes now and imagine this scene. Picture yourself outside the tall iron gates of a rundown estate. You can see a dilapidated old house on top of a hill. In front of it you can see a garden filled with chest-high weeds. It's nearing sunset. You walk up the driveway towards the house. As you near the house, you hear a sound to your right coming from the weeds some way off in the distance. You turn your head towards the sound, and as you do, you'll see a large, dark shape in your periphery hurtling towards you. Your brain quickly registers from the sound and the shape that there is a bull charging at you. As you imagine that scenario, you probably didn't actually feel afraid, but I am hoping that you had a sense of what it would feel like to be in a situation like that. And perhaps you can even remember times where you have been in similar situations and how you felt in those situations. When we go through a threatening situation like that, there are some key sensations we'll usually experience. You'll feel your heart pounding in your chest, and feel your chest tighten up. You feel your breathing become fast and shallow. You might feel yourself get hot and sweaty. These feelings all relate to your survival instincts. In this diagram here, I have an oversimplified representation of some of what happens in your brain when you experience this fear response. Highlighted in yellow are regions in your brain where there are structures that are specialized to responding to any kind of a threat. I like to think of it like your personal security alarm panel. It's wired up to all of your senses and rapidly responds to any information that could indicate a threat. It then signals down into the brainstem, highlighted in red, where there are structures looking after basic survival functions like your breathing and your heart rate, swallowing and things like that. When your impulsive brain, this part in yellow, detects a threat, it signals down to this survival brain, the part in red, and tells it, we need to get ready to run, fight, hide, do something now. Now, obviously, this is a pretty good response if you've got an actual bull charging at you. This sort of process is going to help you get yourself out of danger as quickly as possible. Now I want you to consider another scenario. So I'd like you to close your eyes and picture this. You walk to your mailbox, you open it up, and inside you see a white, fairly plain envelope. You look at the envelope and you see that it's got a government logo on it and it's addressed to you. You tear open the envelope and you see there's a piece of fairly official looking paper inside. And as you unfold the paper, you see in large letters across the top of it, this letter that's addressed to you, the words court summons. And as you read the letter, you find out that your neighbour is suing you. I hope you've never personally experienced anything like this, but I think that if you imagine it, you can probably get a fairly good idea of how you might feel. Do you imagine it might be quite similar to the first scenario? Can you imagine your heart rate going up, your heart pounding, feeling that similar tight feeling in your chest? Now, this is where things get a bit tricky for us humans. In the first scenario, your response to the threat made very good sense. In the second scenario, there's a very different kind of threat to the first scenario. In the second scenario, it's not a threat that you could expect to be able to run away from or to hide from or not to be able to fight, at least not in any kind of literal sense. Now, in the right balance, our fight-flight response kicking in for this second kind of threat is still useful to us. It gives us a certain degree of motivation to take action and to make a plan to do something. But there's another aspect to this that makes it kind of tricky. Let's go back to that brain diagram. Here we have a third region of the brain that is also important. Here I'm calling it the smart brain. This part of the brain, this smart brain, allows us to do all kinds of useful things. It's something that is fairly unique to us as humans. It allows us to solve complicated problems. It allows us to think about the future. This smart brain allows us to make predictions about what the future holds, make a plan for how we'll manage that. It also enables us to do what we call inhibition of behaviour. So think, for example, of a time when you might have had a piece of cake and you'd really like to take another piece, but you stop yourself because you know that there are other people who want cake too and that they haven't eaten yet. That inhibition is something that is achieved by that green area here that we're calling the smart brain. This part of the brain is exactly what we want to make use of in a scenario like the court summons. With a situation of a threat like that, you want to be thinking carefully and calmly and making a good plan for yourself in terms of how you're going to go forwards. You might play out different scenarios in your mind, think about whether your neighbour would be responsive to you going and talking to them and might drop the lawsuit, or whether that would actually be a bad idea that could make things worse. We want to think through a range of options and decide on what seems like the best plan. Do we want to go seek the advice of a lawyer? Can we afford to do that? All of this is a reasoning process that's carried out in large part through this smart brain. But in the scenario where the bull is charging at you, this smart brain could potentially get you killed. If you slow down even a little bit trying to plan the best escape route, that's not going to be good for your survival chances. So we have a system for regulating this problem. If there's a risk of immediate danger, then the impulsive brain will actually set about starting to shut down that smart brain so that it doesn't slow us down, cause us to hesitate and potentially get us killed. That's a great thing when something is chasing us. But it's not so great if we're in the second scenario and for some reason our impulsive brain acts like we're in the first scenario and goes and shuts down that smart brain. This shutting down of our smart brain is responsible for all sorts of human mistakes, like someone backing into a car in a parking lot and then speeding away before the owner of that car has a chance to react. Or perhaps in that second scenario that we described with the court summons, a mistake like ripping up the letter, throwing it in the bin and then booking the first flight out of the country. When our smart brain shuts down because of fear, we start acting impulsively and irrationally. We are then at a much, much higher risk of making decisions that are not in our best interests. So this is where I wanted to give you some practical tips to help you in the tough days ahead. All of these tips are about keeping your smart brain functioning so that you can make decisions that help you and not decisions that will make your situation worse. Before we get to those strategies, I'd like to take a moment for a brief side note. When things are really bad, it's not uncommon for the combination of the freaked out impulsive brain and the shutting down smart brain for us to start to come up with some really extreme ideas about solutions to the problems we face. I'm talking about extremes like perhaps thinking of ending your own life. By the time a person's thinking that way, generally it's starting to really feel like it's the only way out. If you have been experiencing this, I want you to know that it's a relatively common response to facing extremely difficult circumstances. Many, perhaps even most people, are going to experience those thoughts at some point in their lifetimes. Now, while such thoughts might be not uncommon, that doesn't mean that we should just shrug them off or not take them seriously. If you've been having thoughts like this, there are a few key things that I think it's really important that you do. Firstly, seek professional help. Call the Suicide Callback Service on 1300 659 467 or call Lifeline on 13 11 14. They will talk you through the next steps that you should take. The second thing that you should do is to get rid of any access to means that you may have of how you could carry out such thoughts. This might seem like it wouldn't achieve much. Even if this only means it would be an extra 5 minutes to act on those thoughts, that 5 minutes could be enough time for your impulsive brain to have calmed down and your smart brain to have come back online, and that could be enough to save your life and prevent you from acting on those thoughts. So now back to the strategies that I want to share specifically with you today. The first and most important strategy I want to share is to accept your fear. I want you to tell yourself, it's okay that I feel this way. I don't need to make these feelings go away. Now, why am I suggesting you do this? The emotions and the bodily sensations that accompany fear have a way of trapping us in a loop where the more we try to control those feelings, the worse we end up feeling. I know that it sounds like accepting fear won't really achieve anything, but try it, trust me, it will help you to feel more in charge. Strategy 2 is to relax. When we relax our body physically, it signals to our impulsive brain that it's okay to stand down. If you had just run away from something, once you stop running, your breathing starts to slow back down, your heart rate starts to come back down, and this signals into the impulsive brain that it's okay, that the danger has passed. This lets your brain know, I'm safe now. For situations where we can't run away from the threat, this simple tool of relaxation can be quite powerful in bringing us back into regulation and getting our smart brain back online. Now, this is not at all a new idea, and I'm almost certain you would have heard this somewhere before. In fact, it's really very likely that you've tried it before. And so you might be thinking right now, well, I've tried this, but this doesn't work for me. Well, there are a couple of things that it's important to understand. Firstly, your body and your brain is going to resist relaxation to begin with. Why? Because your impulsive brain is screaming, danger, danger, danger. Imagine yourself in a cinema watching a movie, trying to relax, when people around you are screaming, fire, fire. Of course you would have trouble doing it. This is one of the reasons that first step of accepting your fear is important. If you've accepted your fear and you've recognized there's nothing for you to actually run away from right now, then your smart brain is functioning just enough for you to know that it's theoretically okay for you to relax. But don't expect that the impulsive brain is then just going to give up without a fight. So be fully prepared that when you do try to relax, at first it's just going to feel plain wrong. I teach my clients 2 strategies for relaxation. The first is a slow breathing technique that we'll do in this video today. And the second is a progressive muscle relaxation, which I'll try to put up in another video later. So the breathing technique is really quite simple. What we want to do is slow down our breathing. When the impulsive brain has been activated, it's signaling via that survival brain that we talked about before that you need to get your heart rate up and that your breathing needs to be fast so that you can get plenty of oxygen to be able to run or to fight. Now, generally for most people, it's not possible to consciously slow down your heart rate. So that's why we target breathing. It's something that everybody can actually consciously override. But as I said before, that's not going to just feel natural. So fully expect that when you first start trying to slow down your breathing, it's going to feel uncomfortable. I often liken it to having a hold your breath competition and how that feels as the time passes and you start to get this really nagging feeling that you need more air. It's often what it feels like for people when they try to engage in this breathing relaxation technique. Generally, if you can get past the kind of 20 to 30 second mark, then you'll start to feel the calmness start to come over you. But in those initial 30 seconds, sometimes more, it will often feel quite uncomfortable. Now, there's a few things that it helps to understand about how we breathe to make this strategy effective. So if you could imagine that my fingers here represent your rib cage, your lungs are just kind of hanging inside that cavity. Your lungs don't have any muscles in them. They have no way to move themselves. What happens is you have a muscle that sits underneath the rib cage, above your stomach. It's called the diaphragm muscle. And that muscle, when it contracts, creates a void that, through laws of physics basically, the lungs will be sort of pulled outwards to fill that space. It creates a vacuum. So the lungs are pulled outwards, and that draws air in through your nose or through your mouth. So what I want you to do to start with is to put one hand on your chest and one hand on your stomach. And I want you to take one deep breath in and out. And I want you to notice which hands move. Now in that example there, you probably could see both of my hands moving. Now this top hand doesn't technically really need to move because, as I said before, the lungs fill up within the chest cavity. So there's no need really for that to open up any further. So what we want to try to do to breathe is to create a sensation like you're breathing into your belly. Try to imagine that the air is actually going down into the stomach and breathe in such a way that you feel really just mainly the bottom hand move. And then we're going to breathe using a sequence that's just simple to remember. Now, if you were to Google about slow breathing exercises, you find lots of different techniques described. I've looked into this a bit. Some of them want you to count so many counts breathing in and a different number breathing out. As far as I've been able to research, there's no sort of specific scientific evidence that indicates that one technique works better than another. So personally, I pick one that's very easy to remember. It's simply breathing in for 4 counts, holding then for 2 counts, breathing out for 4 counts, and then holding again for 2 counts. And each count we want to pace at about 1 second. Now, if you're anxious, you can be breathing at a rate 20, 40 breaths per minute. But a person who's relaxed is generally going to be taking only maybe 8 to 12 breaths a minute. So if you think about it, that's actually quite slow. So let's try that now. So I want you, starting from being relaxed, so starting with your lungs sort of empty-ish, I want you to start breathing in for a count of 4. So now breathing in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, then out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, in, 2, 3, 4, hold, out, 2, 3, 4, hold. And now if you can try to continue that cycle at about that pace, but if you need to vary it a little bit, experiment around. Obviously, I can't find just one count that will be exactly right for everybody. So you might like to pause this video now, run back and just try that again. And like I said before, you probably need to do this for upwards of a minute to really experience for yourself firsthand whether it even relaxes you. So I really want to strongly urge you not to just give up after 20 or 30 seconds. And I'd also say, don't just give this up after one try either. What I generally recommend to people is, do this every day. And the other thing about this, the other common mistake that people make is they kind of file this idea away, okay, yeah, breathing might help me when I'm anxious. And then they only try to do it when they're in the middle of something really difficult. Now, that's likely to not work so well for you because if that smart brain that we were talking about before is offline, you're not really going to have the presence of mind to remember and be able to kind of follow through on the process of this breathing exercise. So I always recommend to people, pick a quiet, peaceful time of day. For a lot of people, it might be when they're lying in bed, trying to go to sleep. And practice this then. Try to practice it first of all when you already are relaxed and really get the technique down, get familiar with it, so that when a situation comes along where you are feeling stressed, where you are feeling anxious, it feels quite natural and automatic to bring yourself into that pattern of breathing. Now that concludes the practical strategies from today's video. I'll try to post another video walking you through the progressive muscle relaxation exercise as soon as I can. Another topic that I've got planned for a future video is how to deal with unhelpful thoughts. When you're constantly being bombarded with bad news, and on top of that you've got some really significant and real worries running through your mind yourself, it can be very easy for us to find ourselves kind of locked in onto negative thinking. And if you've ever tried to stop yourself thinking negatively, if you've tried telling yourself stop thinking that way or anything like that, you probably know that it just doesn't really seem to work. So I'll try to release a video later about what we call diffusion strategies. But in the meantime, there's a really great video on this topic by Stephen Hayes. I'll put a link to that in the description. But if you want to search it up, it's called Mental Breaks to Avoid Mental Breaks. Now, if you live in Australia and you're thinking that you would like to see a psychologist, there's a good chance that you'd be able to have at least part of the costs of your appointments covered by Medicare. So the first step, if you wanted to take that up, is to book yourself an appointment with your GP to have an assessment and a referral made to a psychologist. The Medicare system, you must have a referral from either a GP or a psychiatrist to a psychologist to be able to access Medicare rebates. When you book the appointment with your GP, you need to let the practice know that you're booking for that purpose so that they can book you in for the right item. Your GP will then take you through an assessment process to see if you're eligible for a referral under the Medicare scheme and access then to those rebates. If you do see a psychologist face-to-face, you probably should budget for a cost of around $150 to maybe $250 upfront that you'll need to be able to cover for each appointment. And then generally the way it works is that you'll get a rebate on that upfront amount of between $86 and $126, depending on the type of psychologist that you see. If you can't see a psychologist, then I would suggest to try opening up to a trusted friend. Putting your thoughts and your worries into words can really help you to develop greater insight into your own situation. Having someone listen, even if they don't have any advice to offer you, can really help. If neither of those is possible, I'd encourage you to maybe try a practice of journaling, or perhaps even recording your thoughts on a memo app or a recording app on your smartphone. Formulating your thoughts into words, whether written or spoken, will often help you to have a better grasp of your situation and feel better equipped to manage it. Please look after yourself. And please let us know in the comments to this video if anything that I've shared today is helpful or unhelpful. Hopefully the more feedback I get, the more helpful I can be. So thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe so that you can be notified of any future videos that we put up. I look forward to seeing you again soon.